I'll be filming this video in parts because I read a stupid amount of books this month and I have to leave soon, so this will be kind of filming part one. You'll see this outfit and then at some point it'll switch over. This is my July wrap-up. As I said, I read a stupid amount of books, 29. Now a lot of those were short, a lot of them weren't. I was just kind of floundering at some point in this month, so I was reading whatever. But let's get into the numbers. We're gonna do better in August. We're gonna do so much better in August. So my goal is for 33% of the books I read every month to be purchased. In July, it was 20.69. Nice. So low. Audio is 44.83. I don't have a goal for that. It's just interesting to me to track. 24.14% of the books that I read were by white authors. Same number for black authors, which is lower than I would like. And then 48.28% were by Indigenous and other POC authors. And that number doesn't quite add up to 100 because one book that I read, so 3.45% of the books, was an anthology. And so the authors were of all different ethnicities. There was an anthology that I read, New Sons 2. It was by all BIPOC authors. So I put that in the IPOC category. That's just how I've decided to count it. My average rating, I thought at one point was going to be much lower than this, but we kind of corrected the plane out of its dive, and my average rating was 3.71 stars. I'll be skipping over books that I've reviewed in other videos. Clairboyance by Christina Kahakawila, I gave 4 stars, reviewed that in my, I think, Seattle Book Bingo video. A book that I have not reviewed yet was Forged in FIYAH, edited by Devon Sanders. This was an ARC kindly provided to me by Tor Books. As with most anthologies I read, especially ones that I'm reviewing as an ARC, I rated each story and then averaged out my rating. So this anthology got an average of 3.25 stars. The concept of this is that this is kind of a celebration of the 10th anniversary of the FIYAH magazine. I have a few issues of this magazine on my e-reader that I need to read. My goal is to do that this year. The sad and ironic thing is that that magazine is actually shutting down or taking a break this year, so this is kind of like a swan song for them. Unfortunately, I think a lot of the editorial staff got burned out and there's rising costs for things. I did give a story in here 5 stars. It was by Eden Royce, who's one of my favorite middle grade authors. I don't like her short stories as much. I did read her short story collection, but this one was 1 by an author I already am predisposed to like, and 2 is about losing your dad, which really hit home for me. So I really liked her story, All That Remains. I thought it was very beautiful. I think short stories hit well for me, especially short stories in this collection, when you're taking something mundane and making it fantastical, but you're still using that to talk about the mundane thing, like losing your dad or losing a partner and a child in the case of Rescue Drone D10191 by Tonya D. Jackson, another story that I enjoyed. I enjoy and get a lot out of short stories that manage to have really good world building in like 40 pages. I always think that's impressive, and I'm always more drawn to fantastical versus like contemporary with one fantastical element. That's just, you know, personal preference. I also liked this story called Flight by C.L. Clarke, the author of I think it's the Faithful and the Fallen trilogy, which I DNF'd the first book, but I have enjoyed shorter stuff by them. There were a few stories that I've started calling wait what stories. I think I talked about this in my book bingo video, but it's a story that you get to the end and you go, wait what? Where it's like a gotcha ending, or it sets something up and didn't do it, or it just ends abruptly and you're like, why did that exist? In short stories, I think authors have a lot more license to be ambiguous or do a rug pull, and it's just not for me. It's just not my taste. So that was Forged in FIYAH, if that sounds at all appealing to you. Did I mention what FIYAH magazine is? I'm so sorry. FIYAH magazine is SFF writing by Black authors, so these were all original SFF short stories by Black authors. Sorry, I think I went into that assuming that you would know, and you might not. Then, books I read for my Lady Astronaut video, which didn't do very well. I'm very proud of it, and I had a lot of fun making it, so if you haven't yet, please go check out my Lady Astronaut video. That's one of my favorite videos I've made this year. But I read The Six by Lauren Grush, which I gave 4 stars, and The Star of Moon Village by Jennifer Ann Richter, which I gave 3.5 stars. Next was a real bright spot, and that was Amberlough by Laura Elena Donnelly. This book had so much, I want to say class, but that's not the right phrase, but it's like the tactile details of this book made me want to like stay up until 2 a.m. drinking martinis and then having coffee and rushing to work. Like it made me want to go smoke a cigarette in like a good way. You shouldn't, like, I don't want to smoke. I've never smoked. But it just had that like 30s tactile quality to it. So this is a fantasy book only in the sense that it is set in a secondary world. There's no magic in it. It's just a different world, but it is very similar to the fall of the Weimar Republic in Germany and the beginnings of the Nazi Party taking over. There is I don't even know what to call it, like a conglomeration of 4 states that kind of share this identity, and they are unified by a like single nationalist party within this book, but every state kind of has its own influence from a Earth country. Amberlough is kind of like Berlin, but also I think I see shades of like New York in it. There is one that is similar to Scotland. The audiobook narrator, Mary Robinette Kowal, does a Scottish voice for all characters from there. There's one that's more Polish, and I don't remember the 4th one. I think it might be... No, I can't remember now. And it's told from the perspective of 3 characters, 2 nightclub dancers, they strip, and a man, Cyril, who's a spy. Cyril is such a complicated character where, like, I can't exactly tell you why, but I both felt for him and like sympathized with him and enjoyed reading from his perspective, and I also kind of wanted him to die a violent death. One of the nightclub dancers, a man named Aristide, who is black, is Cyril's lover, but Aristide is also a smuggler and is being investigated by Cyril. They have a complicated dynamic, but they feel very strongly about each other. And then the 3rd character is this other nightclub dancer, a woman named Cordelia. I don't know why I had such a hard time with that. She's like my favorite character. Cordelia ends up doing some work for Aristide and kind of getting involved in this brewing revolution. I read it when I was feeling very like anxious, and it was the only thing that was making me like happy and relaxed, even though it is about like espionage and betraying your lover, and I'd wanted to drink so many martinis while reading this. It's the like rainy streets, you know, leaving a taxi, running into a nightclub, just all of that good like detail, and a pretty gripping story along the way about these 3 characters, each in their own way trying to survive this seemingly like inevitable fascist takeover. And I gave it 4.25 stars. I feel like I haven't described it well at all. I am struggling a little bit to remember the plot, but like it's the details that really stick out to me that like really made me happy while reading it. Then was another arc, No Place on Earth by Andrea Beatriz Arango. I received this from Random House Children, so thank you for the arc. Andrea Beatriz Arango writes a lot of books in verse. This is her first partly in prose, part of it's in verse. It's about a young boy from Puerto Rico whose mom and sister moved to Montana so the mom can work at Yellowstone, and the parents are having a bit of a break, a trial separation, and he is very sad about this. He doesn't want to move to Montana. He wants to stay with his dad in Puerto Rico, and he's really confused why his mom and sister are so happy to be one in Montana and two away from his dad. He's always had these like scary nightmares and anxiety. Moving to Yellowstone kind of makes those worse. He's afraid of lots of things within the park. There are like lots of scary things within Yellowstone, like the hot springs can be scary. People have hurt themselves. Bison are scary. They're huge and they turn over cars. But he is really like only seeing the scary things and not like the natural beauty or the fact that his mom and sister are really happy here. And he starts sharing dreams with a young boy in his school. And like Arango's other work, like this deals a lot with mental health and kind of like main character being able to talk about his anxiety when his dad just wants him to be macho, and how it's kind of like frowned upon in Puerto Rican culture to talk about mental health. Arango deals with this theme in Eva Liz Explains It All as well. I gave it 4 stars and I thought it was perfectly nice. I then listened to the audiobook of The Wordhord by Hannah Vadine. This was a lot of fun. I've been watching Milo Rossi on YouTube. He's an archaeologist who makes informative video essays and essays about conspiracy theories and misinformation that I find very entertaining, and he really scratches this part of my brain that I don't always engage, which is a love of history, the ancient world, mummies, prehistory, stuff that I loved as like a 5-year-old. Before I got into fantasy, I loved history and mummies. And I think those two things kind of go hand in hand. Like history can feel just as fantastical to kids and to adults still as fantasy and sci-fi. So The Wordhord is about Old English, and the author, who's a historian and linguist of Old English, takes you through all of these various words and how they illuminated the life that people speaking Old English lived. I really liked I can't remember them now, I think they're mononyms, but they are words that only have one instance in literature, because it's like hard to find writing in Old English. You can find it on like vellum or carved into places, and this is from like 8th century England, so not a lot of it has survived, and there are some words that only occur in like one book. It'd be like, if you found a copy of The Hobbit and you're like, what is a hobbit? No other like books in New English talk about hobbits. What is that? It was very enjoyable and transportive. I learned a lot and I gave it 4 stars. Now we're getting into a book that I actually purchased. The Magician's Daughter by H.G. Perry. I first got introduced to Perry when I got an arc of The Witch Below the Dreaming Wood, one of my favorite books so far this year. I don't want to say that reading this book made me lower my rating of that book, but it made me see it in a little bit of a new light. And I don't necessarily mean that negatively. It's just that I've only read 2 of Perry's books, and I feel like I can kind of see a formula. I don't know if her other books are like that, but the formula is tight cast, platonic relationships mostly, using a myth from the British Isles and making it real within the book, and a tight number of locations, as if it were a stage play almost. You can't have too big of a cast, and you can't have too sprawling of a set design. And those things are both are in both this book and The Witch Below the Dreaming Wood. There are lots of things about Witch Below the Dreaming Wood that I liked that were unique to that book, that were not in The Magician's Daughter. It's not a complete retread. It didn't follow like the same themes. It's just like I can see the same building blocks or scaffolding in these two books. This takes place in around 1912. The main character is a young girl named Biddy. She's 16. She's lived her entire life on this hidden island off the coast of Ireland called High Brazil. This is an actual legend. This used to be on maps, a island that would only appear every 10 years. And she's been raised her whole life by this magician named Rowan and his rabbit familiar Hutchinson, who can sometimes turn into a guy, a human, but it's mostly a rabbit because it takes magical power. And Rowan is being like hunted and looked for by other magicians. There's this society of magicians and this kind of council based in London. Several years before the book starts, like over 100, I think. Rowan is very long-lived. Rowan and this woman, Morgana, is that right? Morgaine, were on the council, and a man that they had helped bring into power kind of like did this like coup and started hoarding magical energy for himself, because there is a crisis that magicians need to like renew their magic with a source of magic like ambiently that occurs naturally, and it is starting to like leak from the world. One of the reasons that Hutch, the rabbit, can't turn into a human very often is their supply of magic is low. I liked this. I thought it was a little bit slow, and there's a little bit too much of like going back and forth from the island. It was like, we're in London and then we go back to the island, and then we're in this place and then we go back to the island. And like the island is cool, but there's not a lot going on it. It's not enormous, and only Biddy and Hutchincroft and some rabbits live there, and Rowan. Just because of the like small cast, it's a lot of just like characters having conversations with each other, and I don't know. I gave it 3.75 stars. I thought it could have been more compelling, and I guess if I'd read this and then The Witch Below the Dreaming Wood, I would have said like, oh, this is a big improvement, so it's my own fault for kind of going backwards like this. I then was on a car ride with my roommate, and I wanted to show them A Long and Speaking Silence by Nevo, so we got it on audio, and I reread that, so I'm not counting that towards my average monthly rating, but I did enjoy it a second time. I then read Armistice by Laura Elena Donnelly. I did this kind of like alternating between audio and the book form. It's the sequel to Amberlough, and I didn't like it as much. We're in a new location. We have a new POV character, so we're still following Cordelia and Aristide, and then another character gets added, and it's kind of a spoiler as to who that third person is. It felt like not a lot happened in this book. I can only tell you like 3 actual events that happened, and then it felt like there was a lot of talk about like, oh, we gotta hide this, we gotta hide that this person's here, we gotta hide that I'm talking to this person. Oh no, the government maybe has photos of this person that's here. We're in a sort of country, I think, based on India, but all the characters are from Amberlough. So you didn't have the same tension of this imminent fascist takeover. It was just like people talking and thinking about the fascist takeover having already happened. All this build up to this plan that eventually does get executed, but up until the plan, there was like nothing that happened, it felt like. So yeah, I didn't like it as much, and I gave it 3.75 stars. I then listened to the audio of The Teacher of Nomadland by Daniel Nayeri. This was a pretty short one. I gave it 4 stars. This is historical fiction. It's a middle grade, and it is about 2 siblings living in Iran during World War II. Iran has been taken over by both the British and the Russians to prevent Germany from getting access to oil. Their father was the teacher for these nomads. He would go travel with them and teach the children how to read. After the father passes away, the siblings don't really know what to do or where to go, so they try and go follow the nomads, and the 12-year-old boy that's the main character tries to become the teacher, and then all these events happen and they're kind of like on the run a little bit. There's a really great sequence near the end that I liked that was all about like overcoming differences and working together. It does talk about the creation of Israel as a state. It's a kid's book, so I understand it can't go super in-depth into that. I wish that he would have talked about it a little bit more, like he says in his afterword, that he's trying to show a time when Iran and Jewish people moving to Israel had like a better relationship, which is great, but I just wish that he would have gone into that a little bit more in ways that like kids could understand. I doubt there are a lot of books for children that talk about Israel and Iran, so I thought that could have been dived into a little bit more. All right, pausing here, and you will see me in a different outfit momentarily. I'm back. Yes, it is a different day. Yes, I'm wearing the same outfit. Moving on. The next book that I read was Small Bodies of Water by Nina Minya Powells. I read this for the book bingo, so you can check that video out for my thoughts, but I gave it 3.5 stars. I then listened to the audio of We Still Belong by Christine Day, a extremely local to me Indigenous author. This book takes place like 15 minutes north of here, so it was cool to see local stuff and local places being talked about. This is a middle grade book about kind of like a single day in a young woman's life. Her mom had her young, and they've both recently moved back in with the mom's father, so the main character's grandfather, and the younger sister, her husband, and their kid also live in the house. The main character is excited to both have a poem of hers be published in the school newspaper and to ask her crush to Tolo. I loved the use of Tolo here. This is a local-only middle school and high school dance where the girls ask the boys to dance. Of course, this is a kind of sexist idea, but I think guys are still expected to do the like promposals and stuff. I remembered I had a kind of elaborate Tolo asking that I did for the guy that I asked to Tolo. He turned out to be homophobic, so I am not in contact with him anymore, obviously, but that was a nice like local flavor to add to it. And things kind of go not the way that she wants, but then get turned around, and I thought it was really good. I gave it 4.25 stars. I think that the like emotional connection with her mom and them being like on their own for so long, but then having this comfort in their family that they now live with, and also the references to like cosplay, going to Emerald City Comic Con, watching video game streamer, I thought were very nice inclusions of details, and yeah, I recommend it. I then read As the Earth Dreams, edited by Therese Mason-Pierre. I read this with my friend Erin. This was a buddy read for the Summer Book Bingo that I talked briefly about in that video, but I don't think I gave it a final like review. But I gave it 3.5 stars, and I think I averaged together the scores that I gave, so it was closer to 3.25, but I just liked so many of the stories in the first half that I did bump it up to a 3.5. The first few stories were like 4.5 stars for me. There were only a few wait what stories, and I had a lot of fun discussing them with Erin over Discord. Great editing of the collection as well, especially for a small press collection. Next was Kokun by Nahoku Uehashi, translated from the Japanese by Kathy Hirano, and I reviewed this in my book bingo. I gave it 2.75 stars. There were definitely parts that I like, but overall I think it kind of dragged. Oh, I forgot to mention that with Kokun we're entering this like agonizing part of my month that was created by reading a lot of books that I wasn't enjoying and that I rated low. At this point in the month, I thought that my average score for the month was going to be really low, and I was just like, what am I doing? I was just reading anything short to see if I could like turn it around, so we're in kind of the quagmire right now. But I listened to You Can't Touch My Hair by Phoebe Robinson. This is a humorous essay collection read by the author, and it is very much a product of 2016. Essay collections, I think, since they can be so rooted in time, especially this one that's talking about pop culture and has a lot of pop culture references, they can get dated pretty quickly. Like, humor is obviously subjective. I think, like, millennial, mid-2010s humor is something that we've moved away from. I don't use this word very often, but there were parts of this audiobook that did make me like physically cringe. I don't think that the book overall is like, ooh, cringe, but there was a lot of humor that it's just not for me anymore. A lot of like hashtag that says a phrase. There were definitely parts that made me laugh out loud. I didn't hate this book. I gave it 3 stars. It is also like, I think, deliberately writing for white audiences, and while I appreciate authors that do that, it's not really what I'm looking for. Not to say that I didn't learn anything from this book or that I didn't take anything away from it about, there's an essay on Black women's hair especially, but overall it felt like, 2016 Don't Be Racist 101, and I have so much learning to do, but I like to think that I've at least moved on from that. I then listened to immediately another essay collection read by the author, and this one was really good. It was Sucker Punch by Sashi Cole. It is like humor, but for the most part, it just felt like very raw, and the humor was like pretty dry, which I enjoyed, and I think that that fit the subject material. So Sachi Cole is a journalist and essayist. She had a previously published essay collection about her Indian immigrant parents' reluctance to accept her white husband, but them ultimately accepting him and her happily getting married. This book is about her divorce from that man and also like the ongoing relationship with her parents, but mostly about the divorce and her relationship with her husband. I thought it was just very well written. I like stayed up late a little bit listening to it. It was very compelling, and it like, you're seeing a lot of her like inner thoughts and the like intimate moments of her marriage, but she also never names her husband, and it didn't feel like it was like voyeuristic. It was more like, this is what happened to me, I'm being honest, while also like protecting the identities of the people involved. And it's sort of like I think a bit of a guidebook maybe for other people in this scenario, and her kind of saying like, hey, this sucks, it absolutely sucks, but you can like get through it, and life exists on the other side, and you in a maybe happier form exists on the other side. And I just thought that her like honesty and vulnerability and wit were really good, and I gave it 4.25 stars. That's a bright spot. We're not going to see that for a while. I then read an arc of Witch Hat Atelier Volume 1. The publisher Kodansha Comics made it read now on NetGalley, so anyone with a NetGalley account could go and read it. You're still expected to provide a review, like it contributed to your score if you didn't, but it's not like a new book. Just with the excitement around the new season of the anime, I think that's why they did it, and that's why I wanted to read it. I wanted to get into Witch Hat Atelier, and I loved the art style. Like, that's what drew me to the manga in the first place, but the story and the tone was a lot younger than I was expecting, and that was a bit disappointing. As with any middle grade where the main character's story isn't as compelling as the adults, I was often like pushing the kids out of the way and being like, that adult, What's he doing? Tell me more about him. And I don't do that with every middle grade. Like, I love middle grade, and I'm not constantly doing that. If I feel like the kid's story is, like, good and interesting in what the book is about, great, I'm following this kid. But if you hint at, like, a cool thing that this adult is doing, my eyes are, like, immediately drawn over to that adult. That's the reason I don't read a lot of YA anymore. So I gave it 3 stars. I decided not to continue with the series, but I might watch the anime still. I then read what I thought was going to be a slam dunk to pull me out of this, not slump, because I was still reading, but just series of things I didn't rate very highly, and it was A Lady for All Seasons by T.J. Alexander. The first book in this sort of series, A Gentleman's Gentleman, is one of my favorite books of the year. It's probably my favorite romance book of the year. And I think this one just got a little bit too, like, muddled, and it was trying to do too much. It could have benefited from more pages. It's less than 300 pages, and it is kind of doing like a romance between 3 people, and I don't feel like all of the romances had the chance to breathe, and so I didn't really like buy the romance at the end. I was kind of viewing it as less of a romance and more of a like character study about 2 people. That is, I think, very similar to my reaction to A Gentleman's Gentleman, but it works there because it's from one person's point of view, and the romance doesn't really come in until the end. And I liked the romance, but, like, to me these are more like historical fiction than like a real romance. The premise of this is that our main character, Verbena, is, I'm not sure how old she is, she's probably around 22, but she needs to find a husband. It's the 1820s or so in England, and she's titled, but her father made some bad investments, and she needs basically to find a rich husband to bail the family out. This was unfortunately very common at the time. So she's out, you know, collecting gossip, looking for husbands, and she meets a young poet named Flora, and they really hit it off. Oh, I should also mention that Verbena wants to enter into a lavender marriage with her friend Etienne, who's in A Gentleman's Gentleman. He's recently come into some property, and he needs a beard, and Verbena thinks, perfect, he can have his affairs on the side, I don't know what I'm gonna do, and he'll help save my parents from financial ruin. But Flora kind of hears about this, and she writes, like, poetry about kind of current events and current gossip, and she writes a poem about them, implying that Etienne is gay. Verbena hunts her down and is like, what did you do that for? Like, you could ruin our lives. What are you doing? And Flora's like, oh shit, I'm so sorry. You're right, I'll publish something else that will distract. And they kind of like immediately become friends and make up. But then Verbena also meets a young man named William, who she's sort of like peripherally interested in. I didn't feel like their relationship got really that much of development. But it turns out that Flora and William are the same person, and William, which is their birth name, is gender fluid. What ensues is a comedy of errors as both William and Flora separately try and pursue Verbena, and William is like poor. He's the 6th son of an earl or something like that, so he can't, you know, provide a compelling marriage for Verbena, but Verbena's not going to run off with Flora because she feels this, you know, duty to her family. I don't remember how this book ends. I don't remember what the solution is, but what I do remember, Lord Byron's in it a lot. He's just showing up everywhere. It's kind of hysterical, actually. And in the author's note, T.J. Alexander was like, the way I wrote him, kind of toned down. He was kind of weirder. So that was fun. Kind of cackled every time he got brought into it. Yeah, it was fun. I rated it 3.5 stars, but I could definitely see like kind of the strain of the premise, and I just didn't have enough time, I thought. I'm gonna go really quick through these next few. I read Tales and Feathers, Year 4. This is a literary magazine of cozy fantasy. This is the 4th volume that they have out, the 4th volume that I've read, and I gave it 3.5 stars. I thought there were some really good stories in there, and some that were too short. That's kind of a perpetual problem with this publication, but overall, I liked it. I read it in like, an hour on my lunch break. Then to just kind of like get through something, I read the graphic novel Hovergirls by Geneva Bowers. I'm not filming in front of it right now, but above my bed is hanging some of her art because I really like her art. I think she's won a Hugo a few times as a fan artist actually, but this is a graphic novel version of her webcomic, and it just didn't work for me. I gave it 2.75 stars. It was just kind of random. I thought the characters were 2D. The art was gorgeous, but that's really the only thing I enjoyed about it. I then read New Sons 2. This is in my book bingo vlog, and I gave it 3.25 stars. Then the pendulum started to swing back, and I read Murder in G Major by Alexia Gordon. I have some problems with this book, but ultimately it was super fun, and I'm gonna keep reading the series. This is a cozy mystery series. It's about a Black woman from America who is an excellent violin player, and she finds herself kind of in a small town in Ireland as the music teacher at an all-boys school. This is not her first choice, but she sort of accidentally ended up here. She's living in a cottage that is preserved as kind of what it looked like when this famous Irish composer and his wife died 25 years previously. Their deaths at the time were ruled as a murder-suicide, but when the main character shows up, she can see this composer's ghost, and he says, "I didn't kill my wife, I didn't kill myself, I need you to clear my name." And she throws a whiskey glass at his head. Or rather, through his head. And you know what? I don't read a lot of cozy mysteries, and the ones that I have read I really didn't care for, but there was just something really charming about this. Like, I thought that the setting was good, it was very atmospheric, the main character is really great and strong, like she does a lot of the solving herself. There are multiple times where someone like gets in her face and she just like stands there and takes it and like stares him down, and it was like I could step back, but I didn't want to show him that I was intimidated, so I just like stood there looking at him. And she was like tenacious and a little like quirky, but she's like good at her job and was trying to help her students win this music competition, and does a lot of investigating around town. I'll say later in the series there is potentially a cop love interest, which I don't love, but is kind of like de rigueur in this genre. But I really liked her platonic relationship with this composer. Like, he's one, like older than her by quite a bit if you count the years he's been a ghost. Two, extremely devoted to his wife still. And there's a scene where like he can sort of be corporeal if he concentrates, and he can kind of like follow her around as a ghost, and she's borrowed a bicycle and she's riding home, and he's like sitting on the handlebars and like they're whistling a song together. It was just really sweet. Does she call him Irish as a nickname? Yes. Did it drive me bonkers? Yes. It was a little bit ableist, but I thought it was going to be a lot more ableist based on where it was going, and then it swerved away into just a little ableist. And maybe that will get dropped as the series goes on, I hope. But yeah, just a good fun time. It was kind of the beginning of my coming out of this slate of bad books that I didn't enjoy, and I gave it 3.5 stars. But then, my friends, I read my 5th 5-star book of the year, and what it is might surprise you. Contemporary, YA, sapphic, that's not surprising, soccer romance. I read, oh my gosh, I can't remember the name of it now, YA Indigenous basketball story at the end of last year, and now this one, and I'm like, I think I might like sports books, because they kind of have the intensity of like, while they're playing, of like the camaraderie of like a fight scene in a fantasy story, or like, you know, you get your D&D party together and you're all in combat helping each other out. Like, that's kind of like what playing a team sport is like. I enjoyed this so much. There were moments where like I had to pause the audiobook and go, ah! This is about a 17-year-old Valentina. Her mom was from Colombia and her dad is Irish American. She is the captain of her school's soccer team, and the captain of their rival team, Leticia, she has like decided is her rival on the court, and it's like, she's a demon. We hate her. You know, I'm surprised she doesn't have cloven feet, like all this stuff. And at the end of her soccer season, Valentina starts as like a pretty unlikable character. I think she's like very sympathetic. Her dad is verbally abusive and just not a great dad, but she also is overbearing and like trying so hard to maintain her captaincy that she alienates everyone around her, including her friends. She messes up a lot. She has a lot of learning to do, but that makes her character development so good and rewarding. So anyway, at the end of this soccer game, she personally fouls Leticia, who's the goalie, and this is on top of like a few other things that she's done. And so after the game, the coach pulls her into her office and says, I'm not going to let you be captain next year as a senior. And Valet's like, well, shit, like not only did I lose the captaincy, like I might not get a soccer scholarship for college. Like that's my plan for how I'm going to go to school. What am I going to do? And kind of in this despair, she agrees with her two best friends to go to a summer camp that they used to go to as kids, not as counselors, but as campers in the older range. And there is a big soccer tournament that happens at the end of the summer that like they're leading up to. They get split into teams, and Valentina and her friends apply as co-captains. And when they get to the camp, it turns out that this tournament is actually like a pretty big deal, and like people get really into it. They have players that are pretty good, and recruiters actually come to the games at the end of the summer. And so Valentina's like, great, this is my chance. Like if I don't get to be captain next year, at least I can maybe get a scholarship this way. But of course, Leticia is also at camp, and of course, they're co-captains of a team. And so they start out just hating each other. Valentina is being like her overbearing self of like, we need to have all these practices. I'm gonna like call out every single member of our team and tell them all the things they're doing wrong. And Leticia is just kind of like laid back, like, whatever, girl, you know, be neurotic, do your thing. I'm just gonna sit here. But with the gradual character development of Valentina, their relationship, like in stops and starts and backsliding and going forward, becomes like not only friends, but something more. I think I forgot to mention this is by Raquel Marie, and I'd read a book by her previously, Ophelia After All, and I wouldn't have picked this up if not for the Women's Sports Square on the book bingo. And when I saw this book on the list of recommended books for this square, I was like, oh, I know Raquel Marie, I'd probably have a good time with this, and boy did I. Yeah, it made me tear up a few times, it made me giggle, kick my feet, laugh. I thought it was just so well written, great character development, great romance, and that's why it gets a 5-star. At the same time as I was reading You Don't Have a Shot, I was reading another book that I was really enjoying, and I paused in the middle of that because I had a video that I needed to finish. So you'll have seen my review of The Possibility of Tenderness in the book bingo vlog. I gave it 3.5 stars. And I then proceeded to finish the arc for A Snake Among Swans by Hannah Kaner. Also, sapphic book. This arc is from Avon and Harper Voyager, and I don't think that I did myself a favor by pausing this halfway through to read something else. I think if I hadn't done that, I don't know, like, kind of if it would have changed my opinion of the book. It was good up until the ending, and the ending's more personal preference thing, but I almost gave this book 5 stars. It gets a 4.5. One of my favorite books of the year. Highly recommend it. Putting it in my sapphic fantasy pantheon. There's a sort of corruption arc that happens and some dark places that both characters go to that was not as much to my taste, which is why it doesn't get 5 stars. But it is the first book in a trilogy, and I'm sure that things will change over the course of the trilogy. So this book is about, there's two characters. One is a member of a conquering, colonizing family. The other is a member of the nobility of this country that's been conquered. We've got Elise, the daughter of the colonizing king, and then Tilde, who has come to marry the king. So this is a stepmother-stepdaughter relationship, but Elise, who's the stepdaughter, is actually 2 years older than Tilde. I would wish that they hadn't been in their early 20s, but it makes sense for both of their characters that they are that young. I want more older sapphics. So it's not a one-to-one at all, but basically you can think about this world as being like the British Isles that were conquered by an alliance between basically the Roman Catholics and basically Vikings, but they're like the world building and details are really well done, and they're not a one-to-one at all, but that's kind of like how I was conceptualizing it as I was reading. You might know from, if you followed me for a bit, that I've been reading the Crown of Stars series by Kate Elliott, and this book actually helped me feel a little bit better about not having the arc for the Flower Court yet, because this reads like a Crown of Stars book if there were lesbians in it. So you've got a like Roman Catholic-esque religion coming into this like kind of pagan area. You've got an itinerant court, an aspect about it that I loved. And they're kind of based on the same eras in history. The events of this were so exciting, and both characters they kind of start at opposite places where like one is on a downturn, one is on an upturn, and they kind of meet in the middle and then branch off from there. Elise is like, while she is the member of this colonizing force, and that definitely gets talked about, she is extremely abused and oppressed within her family structure. This book deals a lot with like in-world misogyny. I've been able to handle that a bit better as I've gotten older, and something that helped, that I loved about this book, was Tilde, the noble lady who comes in to marry the king, has like women with her and is constantly surrounded by female friends. So she comes into this court with female allies who are pretty powerful in their own right. Her cousin Atelier, who is I think biracial black woman, based on the description, would be a good candidate for the queen in her own right. Like, she's also nobility. And then Marilyn is like very like bloodthirsty and also common-born woman. So the kind of agonizing thing and kind of central internal conflict in this book for Tilde is that she's 20, she's young, she witnessed this massacre of her people by the Singals. I might be pronouncing that incorrectly, but the colonizers, and has wanted revenge ever since. She wants to marry this king so she can kill him in their marriage bed. But her mom takes her aside and is like, hey, you can do that, but then you're going to be dead and the rest of us are going to have to deal with the consequences. And just based on kind of the current court situation, what you want to do is actually going to make things worse, even if it'll make you feel better temporarily, and then you don't have to worry about it because you're going to be executed. And so Tilde has to kind of quell her own lust for revenge and bloodthirstiness and play the long game, pretend to be devoted to this Singal religion, the wing, and forsake her pagan religion, which she feels very deeply about. She has to give birth to a son and be the regent for that son while he grows up, and ingratiate herself in the court so that people will listen to her and follow her, all with the intent of maybe 15 years down the line freeing her country, because the two cultures have become so enmeshed that there's not really a way to split them apart easily. I think there were so many moral dilemmas presented in this book that the characters have to wrestle with that I found like very compelling and well done. And I really like good characters. I've gotten better at enjoying complicated characters. There's actually a book that I'll talk about in a bit that had the same premise but let the characters be good and not have to do bad things, and it's just interesting. Anyway, Elise is religious, devoted to her father, devoted to her family even though they abuse her. There's this event that happened when she was younger that gets hinted at a lot, and you don't learn what happened until later in the book, but she's been forbidden to read and write by her father, and with his aging mind, he sometimes doesn't remember who she is, but her little brothers, whom she helped raise, are starting to come into power in their own right and are tossing her aside. So she's really struggling. She doesn't have a lot of friends at court. And when she sees and meets her new queen and stepmom, Tilde, she very slowly starts to realize, one, the Singals are pretty bad, and a lot of the ideals that they espouse, they don't follow. Like, she's like, family above everything, loyalty to the family, and then it's like, girl, none of your family gives a shit about you. They're not loyal to you. Why should you be loyal to them? They don't care about family loyalty. They just want to get ahead for their own ends. She also realizes that aside from the queen, she's the woman with the most power at court, or she should be, and she just doesn't know how to wield it, and doesn't know how to wield it for good. And so she's kind of learning how to do that over the course of this book. I think that, and this is not necessarily a critique, it's just something that I noticed, Tilde is a lot more of the thrust of the story. I think Elise's perspective is very important, and I think it would have been an entirely different book without it. And it didn't feel like, oh, a colonizer romance at all. I think it really skirted around a lot of that, and it really made Elise deal with like what she believes in and is implicit in as a occupying royal family in this land. I feel like I just need to reread this book because at the time while I was reading it, I was really enjoying it, and then I paused and put it down, and one, I just really liked it and would like to reread it, and two, I would love to be able to like talk about this in more detail right after having read it. And of course, Julia will say, you've already talked about it in great detail, but like there's so much I'm leaving out and like so much complexity that the author brought into it. There were like multiple words that Kaner used where I was like, I'm not familiar with that word. And I looked it up and it's like only used in a medieval context. Like there was a shade of green that Tilde's dress is described as having, and I looked it up and it is like, actually, as I previously talked about in the Wordhord, it's one of those words that only shows up one time, and it is used in Gawain and the Green Knight. I don't remember what the word was now, but it was like a something green. And so there were multiple instances of that, of like, man, she has really done her research here. This is not like pseudo-medieval mashing a bunch of timelines and places together. It's like very much like the Crown of Stars series, rooted in like a specific time and place. So that's my review, blah, and I like I said, I gave it 4.5 stars. All right, last 3 books I read. Fish and Water by Gengoro Tsugame, translated by Anne Ishii. This is by the author of My Brother's Husband. He does a lot of porn and erotica. My Brother's Husband and this are his only like, not all ages, but like more mainstream manga. This was very sweet. It's very realistic. It takes place kind of at like late 2021, early 2022, where people are kind of starting to venture out of their houses again, and it's still expected to wear masks in public. And it follows these 2 men who are friends and end up spending a lot of time together and just feel like really drawn to each other and eventually fall in love. And there's no like big moments or anything. It was just like almost too realistic of just two people spending time together and falling in love. It was very sweet. And I gave it 4 stars, but it's not going to stick with me. I then read a book I was listening to on audio kind of at the same time as some other things, and so I didn't want to be reading 2 fantasy books that were very similar at the same time, so I think I maybe stretched the listening of this one out as well. But it was Blood of the Old Kings by Sung-Il Kim, translated by Anton Her. This was so much fun, and while I can't give it a higher rating than 4.25 stars because I feel like it didn't have a lot of like emotional depth to it, there were just awesome moments, details, and characters. Characters just got to be rad and badass. There were just awesome moments. There was a guy in your head trope. There was a badass middle-aged swordswoman who wants to become not queen, but king of her country and allies with a dragon to do it. Like, Lauren was the best. I loved her. So we're following 3 characters that are all from originally one kingdom, which was conquered by an empire. So we're dealing a lot with like anti-imperial stuff in this book. This is the one that I said was similar to A Snake Among Swans. I really liked the detail that they were all from the same country. It felt like even when the characters weren't meeting, they did feel like bound together. And sometimes when you read books with a big cast where they might not ever meet, but you are following all of them, I do wonder like why some of them were chosen sometimes, but here I think it made a lot of sense, and the like details of their homeland were incorporated well, and it gave a lot of like I think needed depth to the characters. They all have these clan tattoos on their neck, and everyone from their country does. So we're following Kane, who lives in the capital, and he's investigating his friend's murder. We're following Ariane, who goes to the sorcerer's school, and then Lauren, the swordswoman, who wants to free her kingdom from the Empire. I thought Kane's story was like the least interesting out of all of them, and he was like the least interesting character. I cheered every time we got to a Lauren chapter, but this is really fast-paced. Like, if you are like missing one character, they're gonna come up again soon. There were tons of cool concepts and cool moments. I'm reading the 2nd book right now, and I'm feeling just as satisfied by cool characters and things going on. So yeah, I recommend this. Like I said, like it didn't have as much like emotional depth in the characters, and while I did like this, it was like the characters were fighting an empire and got to just be cool and not have to feel like, oh, I might have to do this thing to compromise my morals. It was like, the story was like, you don't need to do that here. Just be cool. Don't worry about it. And I can appreciate that every now and then. And the final book that I read this month, squeaking in at the very end so that I had to update my stats that I told you, was The Curse on Spectacle Key by Chantal Acevedo. This is a middle grade book with a male main character, and Chantal Acevedo is on my radar because she wrote The Muse Squad, which is a middle grade duology that I really liked. This is a standalone. It is about a young boy who's always moving. His family has moved once a year as his parents renovate houses, but they say that they're moving to this new place for the last time. It's going to be their permanent home, and it's a lighthouse in the Florida Keys. I'd heard of the Florida Keys, like, I love Kokomo, but I didn't realize like how cool of a location it is, and how it's this atoll of islands and there's one highway that goes down the entire length of them. Just very cool. So the main character, Frank, gets to the lighthouse and like spooky things are happening. He's a scientist. He really wants to be when he grows up. He really admires his grandfather, who's a retired scientist, and he's thinking there's got to be a logical explanation for this. But that theory kind of goes out the window when he is the only one who's able to see the ghost of a 12-year-old girl who, it turns out, died in the 1930s. This was very sweet. I liked the family dynamics. I thought Frank was a great character. I think there were a few things that happened that like maybe should have had more like weight or consequences to them, and there are a few characters that acted like a little bit cartoonish, but overall I enjoyed it and I gave it 3.75 stars. Whew, okay. I am done talking. I gotta go edit this very long video that I'm sure it's gonna be, but that's what happens when you talk about 29 books. So I will catch you next week. Got a very fun video cooking up for you. So thanks for watching. Please like and subscribe, and I'll see you next time.